Hello, my name is Roland, and I'm about to show you how to render a SolidWorks model in Bunkspeed Shot the right way. Now, you might be wondering why I'm using an external renderer with SolidWorks instead of PhotoWorks or PhotoView 360. That's a big topic, but the key reasons are that Bunkspeed Shot gives me a truly photorealistic output. I have more advanced texture options. I can have bump maps and lots of other features that I just don't have in SolidWorks with the same level of precision. And it's also GPU enabled, so I can get more power out of my workstation for faster renders. One other perk is that it's not tied to any specific software package, so I can use the same renderer with SolidWorks, Maya, Rhino, anything that you happen to want to use it with. Now let's get on to prepping our model for shot and doing some rendering. Now before we get started, in case you want to follow along and use the same model I'm using, you can make this yourself. This is problem 6.105 from the 12th edition of Technical Drawing. This is a classic drafting textbook that you probably had in school, or if you didn't, you should get a copy or check your local library. It should have one somewhere. Now, Shot sees only the materials we give it. You have to do some prepping on your model before you import, or else you're only going to be able to give a model one color, and that won't look very real. So we need to apply some materials so that Shot has some faces it can see and give us some material selection options. In SolidWorks, you can just select a face like this, but Shot only sees material groups. And it does these groups by material. So if I apply a material to this face, it'll be able to recognize that. If I put this into a mesh editor or a program like Rhino and I split this off and grouped it, it could recognize that. Or if I had several parts that were created in assembly with different bodies or different material types and be able to tell those apart. Other than that, it'll see everything the same, so that's why we prep. So now let's go ahead and add some materials to the part. And now here's a little trick. You want to make sure you apply material that's different to anything you might want to do something different to. So in this case, I want to treat the inside and the outside of these circles differently. The reason I want to do that is these outside edges are going to be machined flat. It's bringing down the part. And they're not round, they're flat. Now I want to use a flat mapping so that it has nice linear scratches. And then we're going to come in and do the holes with a round mapping so that it feels real and that it feels like we drilled holes. Come ahead, use a different color here when these colors will be treated like materials by Shot. And give this another go. And I'm going to do this a little advanced. I'm going to use a different orientation color for the different holes. Now this will let me map these holes differently than the horizontal holes. And that way, these vertical holes will also have their textures in the right orientation. There's ways to do this in the program, but it's just easier to break it out as a separate color. Now we're all set. This model is ready to be saved and exported. Now I'm going to give this a quick save in my solid model so I have it there. You can actually create all this coloring as a configuration in SolidWorks 2, so you don't have to mess up your appearance of your parts to do this. You can turn this on and off at will if you set it up right. The important part for Bunkspeed Shot is to export this as a step file. Now, Bunkspeed has a SolidWorks importer, but that only works if you're a version or so down on SolidWorks. 2013 just came out, it's not quite caught up yet, and honestly, the step output just works better than the importer I found. So I'm going to give this file a quick save, and that's just using a classic step AP214. We're going to save it and import it into Bunkspeed. So here we are in Bunkspeed Shot, and we're importing our model. Now, the box settings in here really matter because this sets up the model for the rest of the time we're working with it. If anything's wrong here, you'll end up going back and having to start all over again. The most important part is the grouping. This is how it splits up the model and to selectable groups, and those selectable groups control how we can apply texture and the entire rendering experience. We're going to select material because we applied materials in SolidWorks, and it will have brought those materials in with the part so we can select them. You could also do it by groups, by source, or other settings. If it's wrong, it's going to see it all as one big blob, and then it's useless. I'm going to auto size the model. This will blow it up, make it a nice, easy to render size because I'm not relating this part to anything else. If I wanted this part to be something I could import into other scenes and everything have the same scale and relation, we wouldn't check this box. Tessellation quality here controls how fine it splits up curves and things like that in our model. I'm going to leave it alone because there's no reason to get more advanced, and the less polygons we make in our model, the better, because it will render much, much faster, easier on the computer. So here we are, it's going to bring it in, and SolidWorks models always tend to come in on their side. This is because SolidWorks uses a different coordinate system than Bunkspeed shot, but that's not a big deal. We're just going to give the part a quick rotate so that it goes vertical. We're going to pop the pivot point for the model in the center of the model, and then we're just going to snap that model to the ground, and we're ready to render. So now we're ready to add some materials. I'm going to start with the metal because it's right here. Let's give this model a nice brushed stainless finish for the machine textures. Now we're going to apply that to the flat faces. And then we're going to modify that texture and give it a copy and use that same texture for the insides of our drilled holes. Now the first thing you might notice is, and I'll zoom in so you can see this, that texture looks a little rough. And we want this to be a finely machined part, not a scratch factory, so we're going to dial down the scratches. Now you could use a simple metal texture that didn't have any of this, but I like using something with a little bit of a texture if you can. It just makes it feel realer. That there should make this feel a little more refined. We're just going to copy this texture. And use that texture to handle our holes. So there we are. And now you might notice there's a line that's going to show up in here. That's because this texture is mapped for flat surfaces right now. And that just simply won't do for our rounded features. I'm going to give this a name so we can keep track of it. I'm going to call it H for horizontal and then round. And now we're going to change how we map the texture itself. And we're going to change it from box map to a cylindrical map so that it'll go along with the holes. And now I'm going to come up and do our vertical holes the same way. Now, you can do some of this within the same material too. I've learned that splitting the materials off is sometimes easier. It just keeps it mistake-free. When we get into more complex parts with lots of materials, it's just so easy to forget, and it'll show up in the render. You'll see it in Photoshop when you're doing your last post-correction, and that just hurts. So there we are, all set up with that. And now let's add some cast texture and paint to our part. Here and get a paint. We're just going to use a nice classic blue, just like you'd have in a machine shop. Now that there starts to look pretty good now, and I'd say this would be about where we'd get a PhotoWorks model without a lot of work. But we're going to take this a step further. I'm going to come back to our material here, and we're going to add it a bump map for cast. Now this cast is going to just make the part feel much realer. Now that there looks like cast, but that's a rough casting, and we're going to say that this is a precision part. So I'm going to come back in, and we're going to dial down the bump scale on our bump to make it feel a little realer. Let's call it 50%, see where that takes us. Looks pretty good. Nice precision casting. And now from here, we can go on and clean up our model. All this here is the original SolidWorks imported materials. We don't need them anymore, so we're going to get rid of them with a delete unused materials. And from here, give it a quick render and And so here we have our model. I've had it rendering a little bit. I've applied a back plate and done some scene setup. And this would be ready to go to a render. As you can see, looks pretty sharp. I could call this presentation ready. And it's very detailed. If you can see here in the blow up view right here, we have enough texture detail to really make the part feel real. Hope this tutorial helped you with Bunkspeed shot. Stay Stay tuned for more. Good luck and happy rendering.